But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that tonight's being recorded. So if you could please turn on your microphone when you're going to talk and move on to public comment. Seeing none, and there's no approval of minutes for item 5, so we'll move on to item 6, and that is 6A, consideration of contribution to the portal project improvements. And at this time, I'll ask that we contact the donor of this gift, and she should be on the phone. Her name is Gail.
Hello.
Hi Gail, this is Alex Miller from the Neighborhood Improvement Commission.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. You're on speakerphone in City Hall with the commission and with staff members present. And at this time, I'm going to read the statement that you sent me, and then you can make any clarifications, and then we can ask questions. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
I'm anxious to explain to the commission my vision to see what you think and to work together. In seeing Seasiders begin to care about how their city looks is so encouraging. We are starting to look good. I'd love to see one of the entrances to the city be a corner that indicates the city behind the sign is just as nice, and maybe someplace they'd like to stay besides grabbing a hamburger on their way to Monterey. We need to do what we can to enhance the concept of Seaside in hopes that we can get a buck or two to stop here. Our sign is just great. I'd like to reposition the bushes behind the letters to a more visible spot. I propose 5 24-inch box trees that are the same as those planted on Broadway to add continually and keeping the theme. These trees would be standard of similar height and shape. They should be planted about 10 feet behind the sign, behind the big letters to help blur the building behind, but also to leave enough space for tourists, classrooms, teams, public figures, and that sort of grouping for picture taking. I like to see up lighting in front of the lettering and less strong uplighting at the base of each tree. A thicker carpet of white rock seems to be needed and probably replenished every 5 years as it sinks into the ground over time. Tight, low-growing junipers could accent the white rock. It's my intention to fund this project, if approved, with a check for $5,000. Hopefully, electricity and water could be brought in from the corner, so it would not be impossible. If the commission could manage all that on $5,000, I would be very willing and happy to fund an appealing and noticeable city entrance. I hope this describes somewhat my vision. It would be a proud entrance. The last paragraph is just basically saying her phone number. So did I read that correctly, or was there any mistakes I made?
No, that was fine. I'm having a hard time hearing you though.
Well, I just read what you wrote, so I think everybody in here heard me, right? Yeah. Is that a little bit better?
A little bit. I'm just gonna have to really listen closely.
Oh, okay. I just read your letter to me out loud. So did you want to make any additional comments to that?
Well, I've heard all of that, and that's exactly what I wanted to be said there. My interest in this corner is that it just seemed to me to be the perfect opportunity to exemplify the pride that we're taking in our city. I've seen so many changes happening and improvements happening that I feel that this sign could really represent that even better. And I'm basically here to take questions from the commission, if this is something they're interested in.
Great. So I'll start with one question, then I'll open it up. My first question is on the white rock. Could you explain exactly what you mean by that?
The gravel that's down on the ground is on the small side, and it's sinking into the ground relatively quickly. And I think that some other rock, larger gravel could be used. I don't think it exactly has to be white, but that was what I put down there. Just, I would end up looking carefully at what looked the best, but I think it needs to be bigger and not quite such small pebbles, because it's starting to look like it's gone already.
Thank you. I'll open it up to anybody that has questions.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What if we did something like River Rock, a little bit bigger?
I think River Rock would be beautiful. It's also smoother.
It is.
So it'd be easier to walk on, that's for sure.
And what if we did like two different sizes, the bigger and the smaller, so that it would hold together?
I think that would be very doable. I think it would look nice as a contrast to the white letters as well. Because when I had said white rock, I was also concerned about so much white with the sign and the rock. So River Rock would probably be a very good choice.
Thank you.
Hi, Gail, this is Ramona.
Hi, Ramona.
Hi. The plants that are behind the seaside sign right now, I think there's 4 of them. If we put in your 5 trees, were you thinking of recycling those?
I couldn't quite hear the end of your question.
Were you thinking of recycling the plants that are currently in the ground now?
Yes, I would reposition them. I wouldn't leave them where they are. I would reposition them in the area, because you want space that's just got nothing but rock between the sign and the larger trees. But yes, they would be repositioned, still used.
Thank you.
Ms. LaBeouf?
Hi, Ms. Gale, this is Shonda. I had a question about the lighting. I think the last time we were together, this commission, we were talking about maybe something solar so that we wouldn't tie into the city's grid. Are you open to that? Maybe like getting some sort of a solar powered lights to open that can light up the sign during the evening?
I knew that there was discussion about solar lighting, and frankly, I don't have any experience with it other than on a very small scale. And it was never bright enough, but that doesn't mean it's not better now.
Right.
I think that my greatest concern with something like that would be that the solar panel that collects the energy could be damaged.
I see.
Rather than having your wires underground or something like that. But I'm absolutely open to that.
Okay.
Miss Gail, this is Becky.
Yes.
Hi. Hi. I didn't know I was supposed to introduce myself the first time. So anyway, what would you think of the lenses that you could put different colored lenses, like for different occasions?
I think it would be nice for holidays, that we would do it for a short, just for the holiday season, and then it would go back to a nice white light.
Right.
I thought that was a good idea when I heard about it.
Gail, this is Ray Bennett.
Hi.
Hi. The original plan for the landscaping called for golden granite to be put down, which wasn't done. The golden granite actually looks pretty nice. What do you think about the golden granite?
And you're talking about what is on the ground now?
Yes. No, golden granite is not on the ground now.
It's not on the ground now.
No.
I don't know what golden granite is. I haven't seen it. I do know that what's on the ground now is something that you don't even notice. So I'm trying to think of something, whether it be golden granite, if that turns out to be a pretty alternative, or river rock, just something that complements the sign and is noticeable.
Agreed. The other thing is, we tried to price what it would cost to bring electricity from the city's grid over to the sign, and it would probably take up the whole $5,000 just to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, but it has.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's just really not what we want to do, I don't think. Use your whole money just to get electricity over there.
Yeah.
So we've all been looking at options for solar, and it looks like there are some solar options that are really pretty bright. So that, we can get you some ideas for what they look like in the future. So just keep that in mind.
Well, if bringing in electricity is that complicated and that expensive, I don't think we've got any choice except solar lighting.
Agreed.
I just hope that it does a good job, and it definitely needs some type of lighting at night.
I think we're all in agreement with that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the city. I know he has probably some ideas about the solar.
David Little with the city. Yeah, initially the contractor wanted to go ahead and put solar. There was a little bit of concern about this solar being damaged, and I think with the high visibility of this project, that it's probably very likely that the solar would be left alone in the way that it could be put low to the ground. Okay, so the panels would be low. Just a conceptual idea here was to build something that would look almost like a large wheel stop that you would find in a kind of in a parking lot, where it's concrete. It has an angle on each side. The lights would face the sign, and there could be a light for each letter and the seahorse feature, and it would just be large enough to secure the panels on the other side. So I suppose if somebody was driving by, or if they were walking by, they could see the panels, but they could potentially be a little bit hidden from view with maybe some kind of rock feature that doesn't obscure the rays that they would need. The solar lights have been greatly improved. Some of these lights are, and they're relatively inexpensive. Some are equivalent to a 100-watt bulb, and so when you're talking about Seaside, which is, what do we have, 8 lights, you're talking about 800 watts of lighting. I think it would be more than sufficient to illuminate what we have. And I think I'm open to suggestions. One of the nice things about doing the solar is it's an inexpensive enough project, and it's simple in nature where our staff could do it.
Another thing about the solar is it's so inexpensive. If somebody does steal something from it, it's not a problem to get another one.
Correct.
Very inexpensive, relatively speaking.
Commissioner Wolf?
My thought is too that because everybody's trying to move towards being efficient, energy efficient, everything else, I would think that seeing solar, if they see them, would make people take pride in the fact that we are trying to be an energy efficient, instead of using electricity to light them up for something that they would consider frivolous. This way we're using what we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in the very near future, we're gonna see solar here at City Hall. We're gonna have some parking, little covered structures that'll have solar on them, and people will be able to see that too.
Okay, Commissioner.
So I'm trying to picture the concrete structures in front of each letter to house the solar housing. So it won't detract from what people are doing as far as taking their selfies and everything, or is it gonna be hidden by plants or what, or?
So we're talking about something that's pretty low to the ground. I mean, it's gonna have maybe about 8 inches of angled surface to accommodate a 7.5 inch panel. So it's not, it might be, maybe 10 to 11 inches off of the ground, but it's gonna be lower than the 18-inch platform that the letters sit on.
Okay.
I wanted the record to reflect that Commissioner Alexander is present, and also make the statement that we have a donor that's donating possibly up to $5,000 on the portal project, and she's on the phone in this meeting. So, Gloria, did you want to add something, please?
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Gloria Stearns, the Community Development Director for the City of Seaside. And hi, Ms. Gale. Thank you for your generous offer. I just wanted to comment briefly on a few things because I was one of the little elves behind this plan. And the bushes that we're talking about that are behind the letters, I'm not sure if everybody knows what they are, but those are called toyanberry bushes. And those are actually like a native around here. And we expect those to grow at least to be 8 feet tall, possibly 10 feet tall and wide. So the theory was that it would be like a wall of green behind the letters. Now, toyanberries are also very prolific with berries, so what it looks like is a lot like the New Zealand Christmas trees that are down on Broadway. They end up having the green with a lot of sprinkles of red. So it looks like somebody took red glitter and just went boom, to the green trees. So it was intended to brighten it up and give you something to look at. We've noticed that those bushes have already almost doubled in size since they've been there, and we expect them going through the rainy season to do even better. If we were to pick them up and move, and I'm not saying that we can't, but if we were to, that would just impede their growth for a season, that would slow them down while we're getting the New Zealand Christmas trees established. One thing that I just want to urge is a little bit of caution on falling in love with one species of tree. If you do something like that, you need to have diversity of trees in your city, and the reason that you need to do that is not only for the natural benefits of all the different pollinators that you need to support, but also in the event of if a future bug or fungus or blight came along, it would wipe out most of your city's trees. So I encourage you to think about tree biodiversity when you're choosing your plants. Just a quick couple of ideas too of things that we had thought about after the fact, because we sit there and we look at it too as we drive by every day. And this may not be part of your project, Gail, but just something for the committee to hear, is that you could also do something like vertical blade banners. And I had thought something like that would be really fun when the Gudaseka has events and people are going through our town, and that way it looks like we're supporting the races and we're kind of tied into it, and they might even stop, and invest here in some food and beverage and not just a hamburger. Believe me, I started in economic development here, Gail. I'd like to get people to spend their money in Seaside. Another option that could work would be wrapping the letters. So people wrap cars, you wrap buses. One of the things that we noticed online after the portal came, and became available, people were like, there's no color. Our town is very diverse. Why can't we have color? And wrapping the letters is a way of doing something temporary without ruining anything. And we could even have design competitions for what the letters would be wrapped in. And again, this is speaking more to the commission than maybe just you, Ms. Gale. So last but not least, the process. As the Community Development Director, I oversee our Board of Architectural Review. So when you do come up with your final design and what your final ideas are, all you need to do is you can work with Jackie and David, and they would get your design over to me, and I would get it on the Board of Architectural Review agenda very quickly, so that way we could just get it moving. I don't know what your timing is for something like this, but we just received like a bunch of pollinator plants, and we like to try to get things into the ground before the rainy season. So we're going to be making changes If we could do it quickly, that would be beneficial, so that way the plants get natural water and it takes less of the burden on staff. We do have the water buffalo in, Public Works, so we do have the ability to water things, but that eats up staff time, so sometimes it would help if we had people who were involved in the watering, and I know many of you spent a lot of time helping with that effort, and I thank you for those efforts, and maybe that would be helpful again in the future. So those are just a few thoughts from community development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you for, I did email you earlier, but you might be a little bit late, so thank you for accommodating me. I think my question is for Mr. Little, and this is just a clarification, because it sounded like, when I came in, the issue sounded like vandalism on the sign itself and the panels, but what you're talking about is putting plants or some sort of coverage behind, if this is the letters, the panels will be here, and then something to cover the panels will be behind the.
No, so the panels would, they would be pointing toward, probably more toward Embassy Suites. I mean, they're gonna be at that angle, they're gonna be catching the southwestern sun as it goes across. So they're gonna be, but they're gonna be low to the ground. What I did mention is that when the contractor was planning his original design, he had included, I think it was $5,000 or something like that was what he had added to the bid to do solar at that time, and he was talking about mounting them into like part of this base that was going to be it was going to be part of the feature. And at that time it was expressed that by our public works staff that they thought that it could be vandalized. So that was, we haven't had any vandalism there. The sign's been up for quite some time. It's, I think because of its openness and its high visibility, I think that it doesn't lend itself really well for somebody to spend a lot of time there trying to do something that would be harmful to it. So, and then the solar panels and the lights, they come in kits now, and they are relatively inexpensive. I mean, a light and a panel can range anywhere from $50 to $300, depending on how big and how many lumens you're looking for.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay. So, if I understand this correctly, the trees that are back there now, Gloria, are gonna grow past the sign, right?
That's correct. Mhm.
Okay. And Ms. Gale, would you rather, let's say we have the two projects, the trees or the lighting of the sign, which would you prefer?
A few things. I think the trees are more important. The toy-on is more of a bush that's all around Seaside, and at least in my viewing them, they have a tendency to get brown and look like they're dead a lot of the year. And I don't know if it was just because they weren't taken care of, but I tended to see that a lot around Seaside. Also, when they were given their plant list for what they could plant for In-N-Out Burger, the toy-on was a big part of that as well, and it does seem to me to have kind of a dusty, arid look to it, like it's not getting enough water. I think that the taller trees would be neater. I think the toy-on just grows to a large bush if the ones I've seen are typical. So that's my thought on the trees. I still think that standards need to go back there, and a bush would just be kind of unwieldy and kind of messy looking. But that's just, that's just my thinking. As far as the lighting goes, I think that the solar sounds like it's just the only way that we can go, and it sounds like a good solution. I think the panels can actually be very low profile, like set into or up against part of a very large rock that is part of the landscape design, where we've sheared off one side so the panel could be attached to that. And as the rock is turned or whatever, it wouldn't be that visible to the public. And I think that the fact that this sign has not been graffitied, I think that's so encouraging. I'm not as worried about it as I was. So I'm all for the solar. I still feel that regular trees would be a nicer, neater look. And I don't know about wrapping letters and all of that. I don't I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure when it comes to banners and things of that nature, not eventually looking just kind of tacky and wind whipped. I don't know. It's something, I'd have to see. But that's up to, the commission. That's not up to me.
Right.
I'm just trying to get the corner to look like something that indicates what's behind it, and that it's a proud city, and that that it stands out, and it's easy to see, and it's attractive, and people notice it, and it represents the rest of the town.
So, Ms.
So
Stearns,
that's my thought.
thank you. Ms. Stearns, you spoke about biodiversity, and it's good to have different types of trees throughout the city. Is there a tree that comes to mind that would look good behind this sign? I'm just for curiosity.
Did Ms. Gale have a
Are you addressing me?
You can answer.
If you have a suggestion.
Oh, okay. I forgot to say something about that. There is another tree that's very lacy, it's very pretty, it's greener, and it's also on Broadway. They've put them in with the Christmas trees, and that one would be beautiful as well. It's got a very pretty disposition and light and bright.
Those get to be, unfortunately, like about 40 feet tall. So, yeah.
I've never seen them get big here.
Yeah, so, well, we're hopeful. We planted them well. One thing that I'd like to say, too, just as a reminder, is we were looking at this, there's a couple of us that have landscape architecture backgrounds, and we were looking at this just today, in fact, and we were noticing that some of the things, too, that the funds could go to, so like if solar lighting is something the commission decides they want to pursue, that's great. Adding in more ground covers and things would also be great. There's a couple of species there that could use some filling in. The gravilla, the chrysanthemum, and the ceanothus. There's a few that we noticed, and also the California poppies. We weren't able to get as many of those as we had wanted to for the growing, and I think just having an amazing spread of California poppies would really make that corner just sparkle.
I agree very much with that.
So Ms. Gale, if you don't mind, I would lean towards spending a good chunk, not all of it, but allocate a good chunk for some California poppies if you feel so compelled, please.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree, that'd be pretty. Looking at Jane Klopp's original drawing that she submitted to BAR, it doesn't read the toyon. I did ask her a couple weeks ago what kind of plant there was behind that sign, and she said toyon. But when I look at her plan, it doesn't include that unless there's a horticultural name that I'm unfamiliar with that translates to the same thing.
Yeah, and I have a plan in front of me that has it. So, yeah, the Jane plan. And I don't know if she changed it at some point because I think there was an availability problem.
We're just looking at a design the design right now.
I think one thing worth mentioning is that the designer actually met with the contractor and went over each of the plans when the contractor was putting them in to make sure that they were the right plans and that they were going in the right place.
Thank you. Further questions?
Well, I agree that putting down, bigger ground cover, the river rock or the, whatever you said, the granite something. I agree with, Ms. Gale on that. It needs to make more of a statement, and it needs to not sink into the ground. What's the point if it's just gonna sink? And I think it would, if you could put down the river rock, I would even put various sizes, and then put some plants and things, something bigger, something that just makes it a statement. And then the solar lighting, I think it'd be beautiful.
Yeah, the current rock on there now is not pleasing to the eye, I think.
I thought it was a golf course when I walked up to it. It looked like a mini putt-putt course.
The rock?
What it looks like now, it looks like a mini putt-putt course. It looks nice, the sign, but
Ground.
yeah.
Is it because of the walkway?
Yeah.
It needs color, it needs texture, it needs light.
Mr. Chair, are we, taking a vote tonight on whether or not we're going with the solar panels? Is that the,
Yes.
that's the purpose of this meeting, okay.
Yes.
Well, if we're ready, I'm ready to make a motion.
I'd like to ask one more question to Ms. Stearns about the rock and the river, the rock that was suggested or talked about tonight. What is your comments about that?
Okay, so they were supposed to have the golden granite, and I think what happened is that was about when the trade war set in, and the sign had a lot of metal that suddenly got far more expensive than the builder had planned on. So I think he ran short on funds. And so we didn't get the golden granite. The golden granite, for those of you who know City Hall well, you can walk outside and into the parking lot planting areas where the roses are. You can look down, you can see some golden granite there. It's a very pretty stone. It adds in a nice golden color. It's got like golds and browns, and then it goes off to a lighter tan as well. So it's got quite a spectrum of color, and that might be a little bit more of what you were looking for the texture. One thing that I would just urge you to do is make sure that you're aware of the sizes of what you're choosing, because you want to make sure that you don't have something that's the size of a projectile. There's a wall of glass windows behind that, and sometimes that can be an inviting target when something is of throwable size. So just be careful with that. But the decision is up to yours, and I think staff looks forward to your direction.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead with the solar panels as far as the light source for the sign entering our city, and then we let staff come back with some alternatives as far as surroundings to keep it safe from bad elements that might want to do some harm, and just improvement as far as plantage.
I'll second your motion.
Okay.
On the question, do we need to specify which solar panels or which solar lighting, or can we leave that up to staff? Or can they bring us some alternatives the next time?
Or is it?
Okay, as far as my motion, I would simply because we're not, I think staff is the experts. I just like to make a motion we go with solar, and then they come back with some.
Yes. The word to come back is what I was going to say. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gale, do you understand? Could you hear us?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. I have a few questions. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask them.
Please.
Okay. Does the commission think that this entire job can be done for $5,000? I would hate for it to only do half. My biggest concern is getting water in there, even though you have people that come and water. I just am afraid that when it doesn't happen, those would be incredible bushes or trees, whatever we're going to choose, to lose. And it looked like it was getting pretty dry when I was there. And someone had said something to me about, well, they haven't watered in a long time. So I'm wondering what it would be to bring water in, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't lose the investment. So that's my first question is, you think the entire job can be done for $5,000? Second question is, how, you said there was asphalt behind the letters. Do you know how thick the asphalt is?
staff is kind of guessing on this one. I would guess like we'd have at least a foot of asphalt down there. We're not sure exactly on the depth to asphalt. But Ms. Gale, to go back to some of your questions, I think if with the proper motion, you can direct staff to go back and come back with some ideas for you, and we can look at the pricing of it as well. We can explore exactly what it might take, because I think we have to have a visit with our public works about getting through the asphalt, because we mentioned that earlier when we were doing the first design. And then water issues, I hate to break it to you, Seaside commissioners and all of Seaside, water is very hard to get. We cannot set a new meter, and that's one of the parcels that they will not let us set a new meter on. So anything that we do, and that's kind of why we chose the plants that we did, and we were hoping to let them just get established during the rainy season and stay there, is really water's a tricky issue. And I would be very pessimistic, and I'm not usually, but in this case I'm going to have to be. It's just not possible to get water there at this time. So if we wait a couple of years, maybe that could be possible.
Yeah. Well, that was my concern. I didn't know if it was even something that would be allocated. But those are the questions that I had, because I wasn't sure how the city operates when it comes to those sorts of things. I mean, the cities that I've lived in before, we would get plumbers and electricians to donate their time and their ability to put things like that in for us free. But if you can't have the water, it doesn't matter.
Right, Ms. Gale, this is, just to be clear for everybody who's listening, that's a subject of the cease and desist order. So that's not something that we can go through at all. That was something that the court imposed on part of Seaside.
I understand. All right, well, I'm just, that's my proposal, and I just wait to hear what everyone thinks, and if they like that idea, as far as trees or toy on bushes, or what type of lighting, obviously, solar. I would agree with that, but I'm curious to see what the commission thinks of the rest of it.
Okay, great. Right now we have a motion on the table and a second, and the motion is for solar lighting and also for staff to come up with the trees and to come back on November 5th at our next regularly scheduled meeting. So what I would strongly encourage is, if there's a way, Ms. Gale, if you can contact either Ms. Stearns or Mr. Little, and we'll certainly work with you to make sure that you're happy with this project, as you're kindly donating to this cause, and we greatly appreciate that.
That's fine with me. I just want to see the entrance to our city be very attractive, and to create some kind of interest in wanting to see more of Seaside or stick around a little bit. And I think that as you come into the city, that's where you get the feeling of, oh, wow, maybe I'd like to stay here. Maybe I'd like to find out about what Seaside's all about. Everyone has seen Monterey over and over. So it's just, just hopefully my thought that it would help to bring in business and tourism.
It will help, and we will be in contact with, somebody will be in contact with you between now and November 5th. So
that's wonderful.
Because she's on the phone, I'd like to do a roll call vote, please. A roll call vote. She's on the phone.
Alexander Miller,
Yes.
Ramona Leda Reed,
Yes.
Ray Bennett,
Yes.
Becky Stouffer,
Yes.
Dennis Alexander,
Yes.
Shonda LaBeouf.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time, Ms. Gale.
Hey, thank you.
We'll move on to item 7, reports from staff.
Okay, I am going to report on the decal for our Neighborhood Watch decal. I received a design idea here, and this one is pretty similar. Okay, as you can see, it's pretty similar. Now, the concern about this particular design, so I'll just share it real quick, is that it was expressed that it looks like it's just an advertisement for Neighborhood Watch. It doesn't, which maybe it is. So there was the thought that if we add something that says we report all suspicious activity, it might give a little bit of an idea that somebody is, so there's this kind of a, this is pretty similar. They could all have a yellow border around them, if you like that, or this. So it just simply says we report all suspicious activity, neighborhood watch member. It's pretty similar, but and then you have something that's neighborhood watch member. I think you can probably see that. So that was the thought, is maybe this might have, it could have a little bit of a greater impact when somebody says, hey, they report all suspicious activity. They don't just have a, but I'm trying to be completely neutral on this idea and just go ahead and leave that up to your thoughts. Okay? Thank you.
Anything else?
And that's what I have, and so I'll go ahead and send out an email and try to get a little bit of input on that. Okay?
Perfect, thank you. Any other reports? Great, we'll move on to item 8, and that is commissioner reports. I'll start to the right, my right of the dais.
I have nothing, thank you.
Nothing.
I'll just report that we went to the Parks and Rec Commission last night. They approved a collaboration with us for the basketball court, and we will be working with them to solicit information from the public regarding that property that's newly purchased from the city.
There are a couple things we need to add to be sure they're on the November agenda. One is we settle on a date for the December meeting, because the December meeting is when we go out and look at Christmas or holiday decorations. And we usually do that later than the first Tuesday because it gives people a chance to get their holiday decorations up. So typically 15th, 16th, something like in that area, that's when we have been doing that, having that meeting. So we need to decide on that. The other thing is we need to, on the same agenda, we need to decide on the holiday contest, what categories we're gonna have, the prizes. We're gonna have a business category this year. Just those things we can discuss. I do have a question though, for David. At our last meeting, we asked that the brush at Canyon Del Rey and Fremont be removed. I think we unanimously voted. Have you had any report back on that? Did you?
Yes. So when I took that information to our public works director, and he had indicated to me that the last time that they went out there and were working to remove that brush, they were stopped by Fish and Game. And so so they haven't done it since, and they were instructed, I think at the time, by Fish and Game that they needed to provide some notice of sorts and work with them to do work in that area.
I'm curious if Fish and Game was consulted when those plants were planted in the first place. Probably not. Okay, thank you.
I just want to report that this past Saturday we had a meeting, a neighborhood meeting concerning the neighborhood watch with what neighborhood was that? Hannah, thank you. And the chair, Mr. Bennett, myself, Mayor Oglesby, and the Mayor Pro Tem attended. We got some not highly attended by the residents itself, but a lot of good information was passed back and forth through work on.
Do you have any reports?
No, I was out of town, so that's my neighborhood.
All right, we'll move on to item 9.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Public comment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. The meeting is now closed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.